welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Abasi. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. And today I am going to be talking about selfishness. There's a lot here when we talk about selfishness. And I used to think that selfishness was just pretty easily explained, but in sobriety, I've learned so much about where selfishness can come from. And so I wanted to talk about it from all angles, and we'll just see how it goes. One of the topics this morning was self-centered fear. And we read from the book Emotional Sobriety, and there was a section called Freedom from Self. And so, anyway, that's where it's coming from. But you know how when you're younger, I mean, I know I'm not unique. I just don't know if this happens to everybody or everybody felt this way. Like when I was younger, you know how they say that people think the world revolves around them? Well, when I was younger, I had zero concept of the idea that this world was not built as my stage. Like when I woke up, it was like the spotlight turned on the main actress, you know, um, and and I can see it so much differently now. Now that I'm sober, how that evolved over my lifetime. I started drinking very early, and what they say is when you start drinking alcoholically, or I don't know, when you start drinking, that you stop growing. And it's like I never fully grasped, and this sounds so immature and ridiculous of me to say, but that's what I do here. I just get honest. It's like I never really fully grasped that this is not my stage. You know, like if I was gone, this world would still exist. And that's a difficult reality to face. It's one that I don't know that I really believed that, you know, the world, if I wasn't here, the world wouldn't exist. I didn't believe that. But after having my stroke, it's something that is just all too clear to me that it's so easy to have something really life altering happen, and our world as we know it changes and everyone else keeps moving along. This self-centeredness that I felt in when I was drinking, I think it evolved over time into a self-centered fear that was really masquerading itself as like self-preservation. Um, when I'm focused on self, I feel safe. Um, and but I feel so, not now, but when I was drinking, so self-centered that I was only ever thinking about how I was going to get my next drink. That 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 was false comfort. It was familiar to me, and yet it was very unhealthy. I was toxic to myself. Um, I woke up every day with these emotional hangovers that I talked about recently, and they they were rooted in, well, a lot of shame and guilt, but also resentments towards maybe somebody else, even though it might have been my doing, whatever issue may have happened the night before that I barely remember. But these emotional hangovers that involved resentments and comparing myself to other people and always wanting to be the best yet never being able to achieve that and wanting to make an impact on the company. I talked about that yesterday, yet not thinking about the company to the extent that I'm capable of today, or that I was capable of before I needed to medically retire due to my disability. All of that stuff was a self-obsession. And it's funny to me because what I learned, and it was really uncomfortable to learn this, was that the only one who cares as much, like, nobody cares as much about me as I do. And when I was drinking, that was really that was a negative thing. Um, I felt abandoned by everybody. And that is that fear of abandonment. In recovery, in sobriety and stroke and vestibular recovery, nobody cares as much about me as I do is not negative. What it reinforces is the importance of self-love. Um, there is always this committee in my head that is debating, negotiating. Um, I can be my own worst enemy, and yet I can also be my biggest advocate. And depending on my spiritual fitness, my physical health, and my mental clarity, that is a result of working with my fellowship, my sponsor, and a therapist. um, I can go in any direction. And but they're always present, that committee. Everybody on the committee is always there. And they're all self-centered. They are. Um, but I see it very differently right now in stroke recovery, that it's necessary. Um, I I have, so just recently I was approved by insurance to get this loop monitor implanted, um, which is a heart monitor that's permanently implanted in my chest. And I had to appeal the denial for that 3 times. Two times my cardiologist appealed it, and then he kind of threw up his hands. He's like, there's nothing more I can do. They just keep denying it. So I was like, that's unacceptable. I will keep appealing it until I am approved. So you guys know me well enough at this point, I think. So I appealed it, and I sent in additional paperwork, and I wrote the story about how, you know, there are 3 people that I am aware of who have AFib. No, 4 people in my family, relatives who have or had AFib, and yet they are denying me of this loop monitor. I had a stroke, and there was no conclusion as to why I had the stroke. And the loop monitor is an effort to, quite honestly, make sure that I don't die. And yet they are denying me of this ability to save myself. And that's unacceptable. It's my body and it needs to be implanted. So anyway, I got approved. And the reason why is because I was my own advocate. Sorry, my words are difficult today. So I have to be I have to be focused on self in recovery. But that needs to be balanced with service. And the only way that I have been able to crack open that shell is through going through this vulnerable time of admission that I can't do things on my own, right? Like I can be self-centered, but very aware that I'm not, I'm trying to think of the word. Sorry. Um, I can be self-centered, but yet still know that I need help. And that requires humility. Um, it requires me to stop being stubborn and think that I know everything. Um, Sometimes I don't know what's best for me. I can be my own best advocate, but sometimes I don't know what's best for me and I need help, right? So there's this like this balance of being selfish enough to prioritize, but also being humble enough to put ourselves aside. And my program has given me the tools to shrink my ego when it's necessary and empower me to put myself first when I need to be. It's I get to decide today. When I was drinking, I didn't have the ability to decipher when to be focused on self and be empowered and when to quiet myself down and listen. So by putting down the drink, I've been able to listen to how this is done. And what I shared this morning is like, I can receive all the help in the world when I'm drinking, but that help just kind of lands on the surface of all of that alcohol inside my body and it doesn't penetrate. I can't I can't see inside myself when I'm drinking. Um, I can say that I need help, but it's easy. And again, there's this balance, right? I can say I need help, but the thing that follows that is willingness to listen and to actually take suggestions. I heard this morning. Take suggestions, even though I may not think that that's the best idea. I can make a decision to do something and then share that with my sponsor or with my doctor or somebody else. And if they say, I don't think that that's a great idea, then I need to be willing to pause, breathe, and follow suggestions. So I feel that when I am focused on self in sobriety, in recovery, I also need to pair that with, in order to stay balanced, to pair that with like emotional regulation strategies, like halt. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Because if I am, I'm not going to make the right decisions for myself. Um, have I been regularly exposing myself to my support groups? Because if I'm not, then I'm isolating. Then that focus on self is is starting to block people out. And that never leaves me in a good spot. I I need to regulate my boundaries. Like that could be a whole nother episode about having boundaries with myself when I'm advocating for myself. It's such a complex, it seems very chaotic in my head this morning. So I apologize if it sounds chaotic. I I feel alone on some days, and I need to reach out of self. I need to be of service to other people in order to help myself. Um, I need to lean on other people to help myself. I think the concept for me is that I just can't do it on my own. I can't do any of it on my own. Um, I am unique in my experiences, but I'm not unique in the way they make me feel. And sometimes I just need to surrender. I need to let go of the director role. I need to sometimes I feel like I need to shine the light on other people so that I can understand my role. I'm so incredibly grateful for my support groups. Yesterday, I was sitting in my vestibular disorder support group, and these these people, one by one, they were raising their hand and sharing their experiences with a vestibular disorder. And I had my camera off and I was listening, and one by one, they were sharing my exact symptoms. And do you remember a year ago when I was so like, I just kept saying, I know that I'm not unique. I know that there's somebody else out there who has these symptoms. I just have to find them. Well, yesterday they were there. They were all there, and they were talking about themselves. They were focused on what was wrong with their bodies, but how challenging it is to navigate life this way. And we were talking about as spring has come and Easter just happened and there's picnics that are going to be happening soon and because it's getting warmer outside and parties and I have a party that I'm planning for myself. Uh how do we navigate that? How do we go to a crowded event and not feel terrible? Um And I know that when people were sharing, they were consumed with self. I could hear it. I could hear them talking about how difficult it is and how emotionally they just want to give up. Um, and yet they're talking. What they're doing is they're being of service to me, to the other people in the group by sharing about their experience. It's fascinating to me how I'm just not finding the right words today, but it's fascinating to me how that self-centered fear, if we stop and look at it from a different angle, it can help another person. If I can just adjust the spotlight ever so slightly to stop showing directly on me, I'm starting to see that there's a whole other cast of people on the stage with me. I mean, I think it sounds kind of bizarre as a 50-year-old to be talking about this self-centeredness, but I don't think I'm way off in how I walk through my day. I feel like we have to be, we have to own a certain level of self-centeredness because we have to fight for ourselves. We have to advocate for ourselves. But whether you have had a stroke or not, whether you are in sobriety or not, there's a level of self-centeredness that we have to have. Um, but but why not widen the lens a bit of that spotlight, in order to see that I may need to focus on myself. I may need to protect myself, but I don't need to protect myself from all the things that I thought I did. Sometimes I need to protect myself from self. And the way that I do that is to widen the lens and allow other people to have a role in this play. I can get into these phases where I'm back to that place I was when I was little, where I was the director, the only actor, in this play. And when I go to support groups, I'm reminded of how I'm not the only one sick and suffering. And sometimes I just have to show up and I have to forget my lines and listen to other people's lines. And it balances me between my ears. So I'm going to stop there. I hope that made any kind of sense to someone because it did somehow make sense to me. I don't think I chose the best words, but we do this ad hoc and I think that's the best way to do it. That's how we can be completely vulnerable and true to self if I come here and just talk off the cuff. So That's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.